Spiro, or is it connecting to audio, it says. Hi, Spiro, how are you doing?
Getting
So
there.
we're having a situation where Urja had requested, can we have a bit of a retreat, meaning I'm meeting with her daughter who's in town and Stephen and just she and just sharing some space. But I'm saying at the same time, when there's a convergence of family, and it can be as simple as I said, the baby crying and grabbing a mommy, and something in that body translation that can only has to be genuine in order for it to send a transmission somehow. That there is somehow threads running through the story that appear to be invisible, even though they are essential parts of what is happening. So now let's say a convergence of family from a different perspective, but from the journey, not from the literal.
Yes.
And what shifts that?
What shifts that? Are you asking me a question?
I'm seeing what would shift it. To me, it would need to be a kind of holy shit.
Yes.
Hidden in the story, but yes. So let's say you've had me as I've been having to sit in the front seat watching your movie. So I've seen all these elements in the movie, and I see the artwork, the life, all the principles running through. But it's not a question of going in. You just like you cannot go into the movie and rearrange the furniture. Somehow, it's an artwork. So then you see the life also as an artwork without laying too much of a number. You are, from your perspective, a dumb scene in the film is an artwork. So perspective kind of means that you're in it, but not of it. And somehow, some practice, some thinking happened to you, it gives you perspective. So you've been studying the last years, ever since we discussed that point about the death doula being like a midwife. And it was a midwife also that usually is hidden, but the same one who brings in a child or helps bring in a child also helps one pass away as part of a natural process of the life. And that's somehow why they're a doula, because they see something that is hidden in plain sight and has structures of avoidance around it, or fables around it, or mythological aspects to it, or somehow it hasn't been able to know. It wants to know. And it's a term of all study, maybe the terms of all physics, all exploration. What is passing away mean? Is there, just like they're discovering other universes, of course, but it's not of course until you stumble upon it and they just send you these remarkable photographs to show you an existing form out there that you would only intuit or think about or dream about. So let's say you could not have made it happen. As a mother, you couldn't have jumped into the story and grabbed the person and forced them and this and that. Somehow, as a mother, you had to, in your own mind's eye, suffer. And when you got a call, you had to say, oh yeah, hi, how's everything? But somehow, your sense of this and that, your life somehow was more an abstraction out there in others and what they're going through and experiencing. So let's say what you're managing in the simplicity of a circumstance is a conversation that was going on in absence and in presence. And in fact, from the perspective that I see in my space and your space, the absence brought on a presence that was missing in the presence, the literal presence. That element, the soulfulness, couldn't be reached in some way. And in the absence, that's all there was. There was no literal person. in any way. It's somehow now aspects of that. I think I attempted to be captured creatively. What happens, but I don't know. It's a literalization. It does seem to me that still flux is the nature of things. When you're a doula, and especially a death doula and a birth doula, and you see how intimately the birth process and the dying process, the normalcy of it, and the relationship to the normalcy of it, then you see that your presence is somehow allowing a normalcy. If you see an emergency happening or this happening, so somehow it's to be a present, to oversee something. Now that is a rare thing. Because that is an element that is usually poeticized or structured or captured or avoided or made into this or that. But when one comes to a situation, it's usually something that forces soul searching, for something that you're thrown into a situation where something deeper than your continuity is happening. That you want to go downstairs and do this and is absurd if you have just the heart, whatever the form is. But that happens to you. But then when that happens to you, that is actually what's happening to you. And I feel that from my experience with you in the situation, you have the literalness of the experience. But somehow, as we were discussing the other day with someone, the cancer released a story to an honest conversation. It's not that people can have, let's have an honest conversation, right? The honest conversation is to surrender somewhat of the self when you see that it's not any longer a literal knowledge. You're no longer in the service of the knowledge. You're no longer in the service of the knower or whatever. You understand that experience is now inherent in relationship and absence of relationship. And in the literalness of the relationship, it looks like the person's impossible. You couldn't reach them. It couldn't be. But then in retrospect, you see that they created the greatest heartache over the simplest thing. And you had to inherit it all, and you couldn't say anything. But at the same time, holy shit, it brought it did bring about a hey baby conversation between where it's not so much based on duplicity or looking the other way. Our common sentiment does seem. So in that retreat, you put together with Mary and this is just what time period and how to hang out and so on. Now Spiro likes certain series. Do you? He's going to be my fall guy. That's what he said 2 weeks ago. He said to someone, I'll be his fall guy. If I needed a fall guy, maybe we'll rob a bank together or something like that. But, do you want to be the fall guy, Spiro?
Well, it's theatrical. That's a good way of goofing with your friends.
Let's say that there's a common feeling, is what's being said in what would be a highly unlikely circumstance. And I say, well, how would that be unlikely? And I say, well, you imagine your family coming down for 3 days. Okay. And I say, oh, sure, why not? Right. Okay. And you can stay in Minetta, you can stay over here, right? And your brother can stay over by the next. And I say, oh, sure, why not? Does that sound, you would say, hold it, I don't know if I want such a thing. Okay. So I'm saying that something has happened with Ursula in a situation that I can see, or what she's sharing there. But there's also an instant intimacy because you see the inner workings to some degree of the other person.
Mm.
Now, when you were young and sprightly, that instant seeing the other person may have been a hey baby and a career move of opening a yoga school together instantly. You understand? But now, when you're 80 years old and you're okay, and the hey baby doing. So Urja then is watching something unfold and caring for it by her presence, not as the mother owning the story, not as this or that. So she kind of went in to see that it was cool. And what did cool mean was a similar question that I asked when I was there. Are these people free to fall in love and do this thing? Even though there may be ramifications for each person, it's fair enough that can be. So an attempt at an honest conversation by a simple, are they free, which they're going to do anyway. But do they have to be sneaks about it? Do they have to hide it? Do they have to lie? Do they have to be superior? Okay. So the trickle down effect, who would be hurt? What would it change? That seemed fair to see. The creative impact in the situation. So that question was raised so that it took away something that's normal in the organized world, which is that somehow you have to suppress that feeling and be with the literal continuity in a way that you see the moment that's waiting. And it's not a flaw of the moment, it's a creative moment waiting. Because the dialogue is in fact carrying on. There is a dialogue happening, it seems. A parallel dialogue that may include many aspects of it, which is not so time and space bound. So the attempt to locate that mythologicalizes it. But if in fact you see it, if you peep inside it, and that's what I mean, if you thought from filmmaking or creating or writing, then you would in fact see it from that perspective into the literal. And then you would see veins of resistance that are inherently in the story, which are not overcome by anything, because there is somehow what you do become aware of somehow is that you are assuming an identity, no longer a historical identity. You're assuming identity for the, however you're seeing, for the journey, for the sadhana, for the energy. But that somehow events happen to you where you realize why you've been exploring this or studying that is because you entered into the space perceptively now from a different place. And that there's a dialogue going on for you creatively while you're in a literal story. So you could also understand the ups and downs you'll have when you're coming from a more expressive or creative place and the story is literalized of what you can and who you can be, what should be. So somehow, everyone, I think of us, has navigated some freedom from that structure. So I feel that when it was reflected on with Urja just now, it was more no longer the literal story, which could be a horror show where the ups and downs, where the kids are strong, where you're strong, this is happening, people, okay. There can't even be an honest conversation. Okay. So you've seen that. And then you see a holy shit, kind of instantly a shift takes place where the normal is holy. Where, hey, mommy, hey, how you doing? Okay, come on over. All of a sudden that becomes holy after all of a sudden you little French bastard or whatever you would call you. You couldn't get one, hey, mommy, hey, baby.
Yeah.
And I'm saying how deeply intelligent, hey, baby, hey, mommy is. Okay. I'm not only because you see that the structure was built to resist that experience. So then it seems if you're inviting, and then Stephen, who I knew from 50 years ago outside of, what was the university in Ithaca again?
Yeah.
Spiro, come on. No, important university, not Cornell, is it?
No, I don't think so. Ithaca's about an hour and a half from me.
No, it may
Is
be, no, it may be Cornell, isn't it?
Yes,
What?
sorry, I couldn't find my voice. Yes, it's Cornell.
Yeah. So the doctor had some, it is Cornell in Ithaca, New York.
Yeah, in Ithaca. Been down so long, it seems like Up to Me was written there.
Yeah, so when we met Stephen there, I think that he was in the neighborhood. Doctor was scheduled to have a talk at the college, the university. And so we drove up from Woodstock, and there was a bunch of people who attended the talk. So then they later on came into our line. And I think that Stephen had an interview outside with Dr. out there.
Right.
But again, everyone was broke and everyone was this and that. We had to drive back to Woodstock from there the next day. And, so it was an amazing movie to see, but it was more of a Jim Jarmusch movie that we just saw. I don't know if you've seen the Midnight, but it had all the elements of a kind of hip movie. Driving to Ithaca from Woodstock, driving back down to Woodstock, and then somehow the guy who had invited us in the first place, his teacher Muktananda, thank you, Kai, said that doctor spoke too much or talked too much and he shouldn't be, okay. So then he disinvited doctor from the house and about 25 people were there. So then someone in Bearsville, the next village over, who had these cabins, but it didn't have running water or electricity or anything, but they were sweet little cabins there in Bearsville. We all moved there. And what a strange scene, the beginnings of things, you know, and how it unfolds and this happens and that happens. And then someone suggests, let's go meet in Goa. And And so it's all accidents taking place, but somehow you see, when you look back at it, you see that the idea that life is a survival element of continuity that has a continuum, that you come from this and you come from that, being the developmental factors for you. When you also come from a mystery in the experience. And that means that you've never met these people that you know in a certain place. Because when you meet in that place, somehow that place seems to be in the story from a different perspective. And generally, if it's deep enough, there's an inherent empathy. And it's not in my mind's eye, it's empathy is awakened. Hmm? What do you say, Spiro? That's too schmaltzy. Could be. It could get schmaltzy, though, can it?
No.
Again, when they say, hey, if you're confronted with, look, I'll do a dopey joke. You're confronted with dead Danny. Spiro finds dead Danny, and he thinks he's sleeping. So he says, Danny, come on, Danny. And I go, and he says, stop kidding around, will you? And I said, think that I'm kidding around. That's actually what happens. Okay. So if you hear all these noises or whatever, and you say, this guy will not stop kidding around. He's gonna act like he knows what dying is really like. And then someone comes and says, he passed away 2 hours ago. Okay. So it would look like an act to you, wouldn't it?
Yeah, I would still be talking to you and you'd be dead.
And you would be complaining about what?
I'd be like, Danny, come on.
There's no avocados.
You gotta get up. You gotta go for a walk.
We need avocados. We have to get
Come
avocados.
on, stop farting.
So then,
Stop farting around.
okay, so then you would think that was just a trick. So I would say,
This is an example of me being a fall guy.
yeah, he's just been a fall guy. Did you know that, Urja? But now if Urja is what are you again? A doula. But Urja who's taking something of a course. So you somehow
Yes, I'm
not as
immersed.
naive. You're not going into the room as naive. You see, you may watch everyone and see the thing unfold, but somehow you share a privacy with the person, which is not so withheld, but is coming from a different feeling. So you see all the literal stories in the room.
It's in the building I live.
Interfere with the experience to some degree.
Yeah.
Because it literalizes it in some measure, where in fact you're more, the doula is supposedly sharing the human feeling. And so somehow brings into the room the human feeling, not even knowledge so much as much as a friend in the room who can give you a look when things are going on and stuff.
Yeah.
So somehow they're aware that what they call a private life is not a private life. It's not, they attempt to capture it, but it's elusive. And yet there's an accepted agreement that it exists. That somehow a vibe exists in a family. 25 feet away, there can be a vibe share, where somehow time and space is relative in it. And yet the science behind it, at one point will start to feature because it does see that there are driving forces in the life, but that there are somehow invisible connections that somehow no one knows about. When you show your passport, they show you invisible connections, and they literalize them as who you are. And once you have those credentials, that's proof of who you are, and you can vote or whatever you have to do. And it captures the literal you. But then you see the relationship with your family has not been a literal, that has been the aspect of it, but that somehow there is inherent in it a being there for an experience.
Yes.
And there may be how-to books relating how to juggle that feeling. But it seems almost always on-the-job training.
Yes.
What do you say? That somehow you have to wing it. And winging it really means angel.
Yes.
Having to be an angel sometimes. Or schmo. Or keep your mouth shut or look the other way. Okay. Okay.
Yes. You've been flying over here, Danny.
So let's say you'll arrange that.
Okay. Yes.
And how is Stephen in the? Well, now Stephen is part of a happening for you.
Yeah, and he seems to be doing great. He looks better. He looks. He's there for those who need him.
Okay. So is he feeling like coming down then?
Yes. Yes.
Sure.
He was almost ready. If you could not, if we could, to bring you, to get you and bring you back to, because what he would have liked is you meeting Joshua, his son. But
in fact, we could even have called Rafi from Denver to come over and meet them. But he also is raising cows, and I don't know that Spiro.
No, that's over. That's over.
Okay.
It's on sale, the ranch.
Spiro doesn't do cows, right?
It was a
And
quick,
cows don't do Spiro either. They don't particularly.
I mean, I pet them and I've milked them.
You've milked them?
but these cows are really cool. They have hair all in front of their face. They look like hippies to me.
He just has them as pets.
No. They were there. They were going to start something, and then everything fell apart.
No, but would start what?
Meaning
that?
were they going to kill them or were they just keeping them as friends?
Well,
Well, when you say well, you mean
making babies. It was to make babies. They were not involved with the part that killed the cow. Those who, but they were raising babies. You know, they were
okay.
coupling
Kai,
bull with the
why
cow.
Kai, why would you have cows?
I would have a rescue if I had cows.
Let's say your
Sanctuary.
son. And he
Yeah,
wanted to
sanctuary.
raise- Let's say your son, who's been tough and strong, wants us to have a ranch and raise cows. So
It's hard
let's
to
say-
imagine my kids love
say-
animals.
So let's say my son is tough and wants to raise cows and comes to me with that, and I say, no, but we're not those kind of, what do you mean raise cows? Let the cows raise them, do their life, live their life, whatever. Okay. So they say, okay, but you have dogs. Look at those black dogs running around there. And you're not even trained or whatever. You let them be natural. And okay. So I say, raising cows, nah, I don't want to raise cows. I can wave at them when I walk past them if they're next door or something like that. Or like I see the horses next door. But I don't want to raise them or own them and have that.
A lot of people have sanctuaries where they take cows that can no longer be dairy cows or whatever. They rescue them so they don't get killed.
So
and
I
just
would
leave them
say,
live out their life.
the question that you're raising is betwixt and between, that it's something to accommodate your son.
Yeah.
And usually the kids are somewhat free from the literalness of the shared space. They're free to have a life or whatever and that somehow the choices will be integral.
My son likes cows.
Hmm?
My son doesn't want to hurt cows. My children are very sympathetic to animals.
Yeah, I don't think that, do you think Seth and Rafi would? So they're schmoes also, and maybe Segway would put on that face, but I think if he actually had to do that, I remember as a kid, Italian families would raise pigs and like a family member and then have a feast with it, but it was so terrible and normal at the same time. So, but I think for most of us here would kind of duck meat, although I haven't had artificial stuff either. With this new stuff that people are raging and people are having, but I haven't had too much of that yet.
I don't like it. I tried it once.
The fake meat?
Yeah, like that Beyond Meat.
Beyond Meat and stuff like that.
They try to make it look bloody and everything. It's really
It's
weird.
creepy. It's creepy, but it's yummy. I don't eat it very much. It's too weird, but I
Yeah, I
ate it
had one
recently.
just to try it.
I ate it in Taos this weekend.
Yeah. So we still eat food. We found a way, we're more vegetarian. Basically, and you kind of wing it from there.
Yeah.
Does that work out for you, Kai, or?
No, I don't wing it. I'm very strict vegan.
Yeah, no, okay.
I don't wing it.
Okay, no, that's be strict. Strict doesn't mean this or that, but that you want to eliminate all brutality, all bullshit, all stuff like that. And in fact, what you're saying is you don't need it.
No.
Somehow there can be a natural diet or whatever. That's still to be. So you see that they're trying to cover that story with this and that food. Some of them say it's pretty good. They're creating their own industry, which is not an imitation of meat, but is their own food. But then
do you have honey?
Everyone here has their own diet in some way.
I don't do honey. My kids do.
What about ghee? Are you a vegan?
No, I don't do dairy.
Because I know of a
I've
monk.
seen too much about dairy farms. I can't. The cruelty on dairy farms. I can't.
But what if you did it yourself or knew where it was the cow was?
Oh,
Is that
I don't know. Are dairy cows ever really happy?
No, I once had a weird
know.
experience in India when we stopped at doctor's brother-in-law's place, and he was a police captain or something. But we lived in the house, and Reed was there also. And they had in this barn-ish thing a water buffalo. And it was eating all day, and they milked it all day. And they would get gallons, and they would make ghee. They would make yogurt out of it. They'd make, but somehow milk was one of their, well, they were high Brahmins also. So dairy is their high food.
Yeah.
But this constant eating and passing milk, whatever, well, it never moves out of the situation. Everybody's normal with it, and the kids are running around with it. So I don't, but still weird that you would keep a water, like he's suggesting, you keep a water buffalo in the room next door, and you get milk from it. Would we do that here? Did we do that here? No, I don't think that we've ever had the sense of making use of animals.
I think you have to keep getting them pregnant, don't you, in order for them to keep producing milk?
But then again, like Spiro may say, yeah, but you're buying cheese and you're buying this and you're buying that. And so somehow, and you're trying to see that the packaging says it is made by honorable, nice people doing, and the sheep are okay and whatever the thing is. And somehow they say, well, I only kind of have sheep if I can, and the cheese, or and they say, because I think that I read somewhere that the sheep are the most natural of them all, that the cow milk is not really good for you because they've been turned into an industry for a few hundred years, like the wheat. So when it was natural wheat at one point, but when it became wheat, it was the only grain that could be taxed, and so they started to make it more and more artificial to make it crops. They forgot the other grains to some degree. Yeah. So then they say once they industrialize the food, in a way, then you start to examine it, and you see it's not food anymore. It's fat, or it's just made of substance that will satisfy your belly for a minute or an hour. So then you start to see that you start to make your own diet. You explore your thing. So a vegan, I don't know if I want to go, and therefore I will always be, but I would say that vegan would be kind of second nature to you now, and because you're moving in somehow with yourself with kind of pure. But I don't know that pure means uptight, although sometimes you may need to be uptight in order to protect something.
Yeah, once I had babies and nursed them, like you look at the whole cow milk industry in a whole new way.
Right. So then you're saying that pure means that you're going into the story from that space, and that you are somehow in that relationship where care is a medium that you have. That's your expression. And it's not always laid out what that means, but it is laid out what it doesn't mean. So somehow a shared feeling allows you care. And and care is somehow that somehow the other is you in some way.
Mm-hmm.
So in absence and in presence, that carries on.
Yeah, and I would not want to be a dairy cow.
Well, then, because you can have empathy for a certain experience, and then you understand enslavement, but then you also understand how enslavement can happen. its alternative is the cow needs that place, needs to be in that situation. Its fear would be that it walks out in the field alone.
Yeah, I don't know. They look pretty happy when they get released into
I would say
freedom.
so. I would say so. But then if you helped it be released, you would have to kind of look out for it.
Mhm.
So somehow,
There are dairies that say that their cows are happy and they don't die when they stop producing milk. There's farm in Taos that provides for the Neem Karoli Baba temple that also sells the milk and stuff. That's
you
they
know,
say.
when I was down south, and there were like people who were claiming that a lot of these black people were really happy during that time. They had a job, they had families, they were. I'll catch you later, bro. And then,
Possible.
so their idea of your happiness was coming from a place in them. You understand? From your perspective, you were kind of a slave in a situation. You know, now you can find a kind of happiness in slavery. And that usually is in human relationships, isn't it? That transcend the situation somewhere. So let's say that you're, should we make let's make a call for sheep instead.
There are those that say that sheep are more humane, you know, at least more digestible by humans. That's the statement.
What was that? Well, actually, the ones that they say are the best that you can buy in terms of dairy is sheep, goat, and buffalo.
Human would probably be the best.
That somehow human milk, you say, what did they say? Well, that may be
for humans.
Okay, but then if people are eating the kind of food we were just talking about, spam and I said, oh, don't eat the spam. I said, what the hell's in the spam? I remember everybody wants to eat spam when they were poor or something like that. What the hell is spam?
Humans seem to only provide as much milk as they need for their children, but cows supposedly provide a lot more milk than
it's only because they keep nursing them. That's the only reason.
Right. No, I think
that's possible.
I think Eric's boy and April, his mother, then they had a group of women that provided and shared and utilized breast milk for their children. A few hundred women shared.
Wow.
Yeah, women will produce as much as they need. If they have twins, they'll produce more than if they have one.
Now, I think that you'll stumble upon another woman who had a double mastectomy in order to have the pregnancy. She had one cancer in the breast. But and then she's in a group of maybe 30 women who've had similar situations. And so you saw it was anticipation, but wanting a family, wanting a life. And doing
even guys can theoretically make milk.
That's true. I've heard that. But if a woman keeps pumping, she can produce milk to donate like that because she'll produce more.
Well, there's a woman right there, Erjan. Did you pump any milk out during that period?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, so and that was when there was George Washington was the president. So what was it like?
At least, yes.
So you breastfed.
Yes.
Yeah. And naturally until but you didn't use formula or anything like that. But they didn't have at the time a shared situation with other women. Oh, wow.
It would have been nice.
Well, more and more that's happening, where then people are kind of recognizing something that usually a person is alone with.
Yeah.
And has to figure out. That's why I'm saying Kai may be alone and say, look, I ain't getting vaccinated. We ain't doing, I say, okay, but they're saying you better do this. Jesus wants you to do it. You better. I don't know. And then I'm in the bathroom alone and saying, I don't know. They're on my case. Then the Jews, the Christians, the short people, they're on my case. So then I say to do or not to do. And they say, the do and not to do there's something else that's happening. It's more. And the do to not to do comes out of that. So, and I say, what? That somehow you don't recognize that when you do something, you do it because there was a feeling before and then you did it. The doing doesn't own the story. So the question isn't that much to do or not to do. The question is that there is a kind of creative or moral challenge that's happening for me about how I feel and how it translates in the literal world. And I say, can you give an example like that? And I say, look, I'm talking happy and very nice, but I got to pee very bad. But I'm acting like I'm okay and smiling and everything. So that's a dumb illustration. But can you imagine you have to pee very bad and you have to then talk about, then Jesus said that why you have to pee bad.
Do you have to pee?
The humor in it.
We'll wait.
The humor in this situation. No, I don't have to. I'm talking about when the duality is there for you. When something comes your way that somehow everyone is doing or has to do or should do, and yet it strikes you in a way that's not just as complicated as doing, but that something in you, when it does something, is like to come from a place that feels that it's okay. And you discover an okayness. You may not know literally what the okayness is, but if in fact you're presented with it and it doesn't feel okay, then I may need to see all the stories around it and what is happening and what the thing is. And I also know that somehow I'm trying to protect the naturalness in myself. So I am self-treating in most things. However dumb it may look, even though they diagnose you with cancer, somehow it's not an enemy that I have to kill or fight with. It's something, okay, that somehow you have an agreement going with it. And you're self-treating, but it doesn't mean that you won't take treatment. Your sense of, but it's not so much coming from a frenzy in that regard, because you're also considering the implications of the medical story, where they do treatment, not so much cure. Mm-hmm. So I feel that one thing that's conscious for us is that you're managing this living and dying process in your body. And you're seeing the process there, and then you see the agencies around you. While you're in the neighborhood, they can give you a new nose, they can give you new teeth, they can give you hair, again, and you can do. But there's still something in you that intuitively doesn't want to be like a robot living longer. Well, you want to give me a version of robot there, Ursha. Say they give you an extra 20 years. And for 2 years you could be natural, but then you have to start doing the Egyptian. Do you think that you would increasingly accept an artificial reality?
I don't think so. I don't know. I mean,
they're offering artificial eyes and artificial noses and artificial teeth and artificial.
No. I mean, if I was younger, I would say yes to a lot of that. But what's the point now?
Let me see. Well, she looks pretty nice now, doesn't she?
She does.
What do you say, Kai? She looks okay now. Would you suggest that she get new eyes and new teeth and new hair? Or what do you think? Just to goof with it? No.
Not if she doesn't want to.
No, I think sometime of doing some color, like purple.
So let's say we are moving in the kind of naturalness that's taking place, that we're kind of not in that world. But that some people that we meet, it's an instant, sure, no problem. In fact is, you meet a group of women that decide to have double mastectomies, and how remarkable they were, and then they make a thing of it at the same time, of strength or depth in themselves or whatever, and providing.
Yeah, we have a woman now building.
And how much did we use? I remember in the visit when I gave her those milagro things they're called, where you rub them. They're like holy things that you rub, and it transmits an energy supposedly. And even if you have cancer or something, that organ or something, you can rub that, and supposedly you can create a conversation that's kind of pure in the rubbing. It's like pure, like a kid praying. So, but that you could have conversations. So I had a whole collection of milagros. I have them, one on Our Lady of, I think the Madonna. There's a whole half moon or quarter moon, and there's a bunch of little for feet, eyes, nose, hair, marriages or whatever. They're just somewhat. You could talk to God by rubbing this. But somehow they feel for it so strongly that it's also a kind of, it's almost medical. And in fact, they do have almost all the organs, individual organs that you have a friendly relationship with by rubbing the milagros and sharing with them. And they have more, some that are more milagro storylines, where you'll see the little individual paintings where I was speaking to God to bring back my little sister or something like that, and God was there. And Mary came for me, and then my brother called me, and it showed the story where somehow praying is somehow inherent in everyday life. And it's normal. But then if you do see it, in fact, in life, one is having such private conversations, such dual dialogues. There is such a conversation going on in many levels that somehow an event makes you aware of something that's been happening all along. And I say, if you saw what happened, we were saying earlier, the hatred couldn't be in the story. You see then and it's not because you're then doing this or trying to do some psychiatry or whatever. You see, if you saw what happened, not from the literalness, then the story would not be yours. You see, then you would see a whole different energy running through the story. So the perception forgives the story. The eye forgives the story by seeing. There's not a literal forgiveness of this or that. There is, in fact, a surrender of the holding on to the story. Why? Because you perceive the other dimension hidden in it. So then that was a question that was raised that time when I visited, and we had a retreat up there. Were these two people free to fall in love? From the community's perspective, where no one had to be bitter and no one had to have this view in their own trip. They could do as they wish, but somehow you saw that their feelings for each other, they were going to do this anyway. It was a courtesy to the circumstance, the rarity of it. And so you see, to some extent, if you remember, I'm trying to go back to years ago, in that room, it did bring up certain characteristics in folks or whatever. That was tough. But at the same time, it was an attempt at a conversation that's happening anyway, but it's perceptively shared, not because of the psychological aspects of it, but once you see it, you no longer own the reaction to it. You understand? So somehow, it's not yours to do. You cannot, in other words, the person cannot take on your life and then carry on that, taking on with that life and carry that on. I say, no, you don't, if you're going to include me in the story, I also have a voice. So if you want to use me for your purposes of schlock or whatever, come on, man. Of course. So generally, if you include me in the story, then you're including a voice somewhat. Not that I'm forced into a literalness of this or that.
Yeah.
So then they say, well, holy shit, can that be in actual life? That is, that, let's say your father comes to you in a dream and says, hey, look, if you include me in your story to people, at least tell them, remember how you argue with me and you gave me such a hard time, and you're not mentioning that. Okay.
It's included.
So let's say your father comes to you and he says, I may be literally dead, but I'm not dead. I can hear when you're using me in the story. And sometimes it sounds okay. He sounds like a nice guy you're describing, but then sometimes you understand we never met. We only meet in dreams and we only meet in memory, but we never met. Were you the girl from Paris? Your father then says, were you the young woman from Paris? Are you the woman? Holy shit, what happened? Could you imagine conversations as if that can be normal, when in fact it was normal? And when you look at their life, it's pretty much they were just people. Everybody was just people doing people. Is that magic? Is that dumb? Is that, it has all the elements in it. And when one visits, you're not only visiting the literalness of country and space, but you also see that time is a different factor in it. You can go back 50 years, 20 years, fly over 15 minutes and visit the story. And the dying and the living were important aspects of being able to visit dimensions of the story that would have been impossible while the story was literal. Because an honest conversation doesn't mean a union meeting or people trying to talk about, that's an attempt. An honest conversation is purely spiritual. And it happens immediately when someone passes on, but impossible to get to without that. And yet, so it seemed easy. And then I say, why? I say, because you see, in retrospect, how much of their life was really spiritual. That it had to be literal in some way for it to be spiritual. And I say, well, that resembles the dying and living process. That it was normal, literal, and spiritual simultaneously, and soulful simultaneously. And so what they called spiritual or creative was that it was coming from a different place than money or selling it out or survival. It was trying to explore another zone. That's why it took up different expressions, because it intuited that there were other dimensions. But that somehow you had to be sensitive enough to be with them. You okay, Urja? So then you'll plan and we'll see if it's just simple as that. But then Spiro was suggesting, can he watch some of his series that he wanted to see? Oh, it's not you, Spiro. You mean it's me? Oh, I thought it was you that wanted to say. I thought we were doing you a favor. No. What have you been watching, Spiro? Old man.
Old Man, it comes out tomorrow and Friday.
Okay, he knows.
I like Lodge 49 as my favorite of recent years.
And Derek, are you involved in anything out there? I did watch that Dylan movie yesterday, though. Was it Don't Look Back?
No Direction
It was the
Home.
one in Woodstock. And because we knew that that guy had the restaurant in Bearsville, that it was Dylan's manager, Albert. Al Grossman, I think. So he had a restaurant there in Bearsville, which was 3 miles outside of Woodstock there. And so it did show you all of Woodstock and going around there and the early, and then Dylan went on tour to England. And he had John Baez with him, and they had all these characters from downtown there with him on tour. And And they're asking, what's the meaning of your songs? He says, meaning? What's the meaning? I don't know what the meaning is. You know? Okay. So I thought it was pretty cool. But the one thing I thought was cool in the beginning of the movie, it's Dylan holding signs with the words of his songs while his song is singing. And he's got the words there, and he's got Allen Ginsberg behind him talking to another guy. And I kind of know that alleyway, I think. But he's doing the words as fast as he's singing them with this little thing. And it was worth that. Just the first 10 minutes of the thing was, I could almost imagine when they put it together. It had a very hip element to it. But it was Dylan around 21 years old or something. So that we stumbled upon. What else? Gee, I don't know what else. There's so many sort of things that are pretty interesting. But then I also forget them. And I have to somehow see it 3 times before I've seen it. Now, what was the last one we saw? Everything All at Once? I have to see that again.
That was intense.
That was intensely weird, but I do like the ones who go into the future and come back and
Yeah.
have parallel situations.
Really also just about a mom and a daughter.
So, okay, let's say cows. Can one do cows? Well, they do alpaca. You know folks who have done alpacas before? Yeah.
No, I don't know anybody, but I wonder, they must produce milk also.
Well, it does. When you look at us with dogs, there's no apparent reason that we should have these dogs, and no one is trained them to do anything or whatever. So there's a kind of lovely goofiness in them.
Yes.
So then you don't even know that they're dogs in some way. They're dogs. They're not. They're somehow part of the. Okay.
Happening.
Part of the happening there in the situation. So then I say, but hold it. I'm not. Would I own a dog? And I say, hey, get over there. You mean like that? I say, I can goof with it, but they don't listen to me anyway if I do this. So they know I'm full of shit if I'm going to tell them what to do. None of them listen unless you give them a piece of food or something. So it does seem to me that when the next door neighbor wanted us to shoot at our dog because it bit their dog, and they came from a ranch kind of situation, she told me. I said, I don't own the dog. Did I cop out there? I said, I don't shoot dogs. I don't shoot anything, as far as I know. But since you ladies know each other and you live next door to each other and you're both kind of nature people, why don't you talk to each other and come up with something? But they say, no. When you live on the ranch, if the dog does that, you got to kill the dog. Okay. Somehow, I'm the wrong guy for the story. So I was a failure again. I didn't know a ranch kind of story. But then they did end up killing a dog or something with a ritual that there's somehow you get rid of animals that don't work on the ranch, right? No, I don't know that I would like to do literally anything like that. And I say, were you ever in a situation like that where somehow the literalness of owning the dog means putting it down? We have put some dogs down who were dying, and we've then had a care for them as they were passing. Okay. So we are nuts like that. They're as real as anyone else, and as friendship as anyone else in a circumstance. So instinctively, would it be natural for us to hang out with cows that you kind of know who has cows, man? You're going to do something with the cow. You understand? You're going to that the cow doesn't want to do or doesn't know about yet. So somehow the cow doesn't have an agreement with you beforehand. Look, we're going to do this with you. Is that okay with you? But somehow the cow wakes up and he finds itself in the place. So I can understand Kai's question. What are you going to do with that cow? And Ursha says, there's such kind folks that they see that there's so many molested cows and hurt cows and cows that no one wants, that they bought a place for them to just be cows and do their thing. Is that true, Ursha?
I don't know exactly what was the reason.
Oh, I thought there was no plan that they could just be cows. So let's say she's got a point, but I don't think knowing us or in our situation, it can be so vulgar that you cannot have a place in a slaughterhouse if you're going to have a retreat there. Let me see. Let's have a retreat in the slaughterhouse, okay? Shall we meet while they're screaming, or should we meet beforehand, or what? We're not made for the real world, are we, Spiro? And won't they tell us, what are you talking about? It's natural. They're doing it all over the world, man.
If by real we mean those in power that, run the joint. But if we mean real, as in our own experience.
So in that Dylan movie, he was singing all these songs to the power. Remember, it was early Dylan. And he was singing, and they loved him in England because of that. No one even knew what he was singing, they said. But he was singing all these socialist songs from that period. And he was great. It was great. And dumb at the same time. But that was a period then that before he then went into the electric guitar and made that shift from folk singing, whatever. He was arranged with the folk singers.
But, though he was arguing in that film that he's like, I'm not a folk singer. I'm just a guitar player.
No, he was breaking out of that. It was all interesting because as you fly over the movie, you kind of see that there were times when the experience was in the neighborhood or you were around it or it was happening. Like it was all, it wasn't separate from anything. It was in the cafeteria, it was in the restaurant, you ran into this. But it was all normal in its growing up, in its circumstance. And in fact, I met then Ursha. I came to Woodstock. In the second, third, fourth phase of Woodstock was then where we met Ursha, and that was through Johnny D. Also lived in Woodstock. Whoosh. And then got to San Francisco. So a whole life came out of that. Ursha then went from there to meet me in Amsterdam.
Yeah. My first retreat.
My first retreat was in Amsterdam, and Marty was there, no?
That was this place, yeah.
Marie was there, our Marty was there.
Yes, yeah.
The Italians were there, yeah. It was very nice. And, somewhat sophisticated. Just walking around there at the time. Okay, any questions today? We have just this hanging out. Is that okay, Kai?
Yes.
Yeah. And so we'll kind of, you do understand that if you say cow, I also think cow in the story. If I go in the room and there's a cow in the room, okay. I say, what are you going to do with the cow? In India, you have cows walking around in the street and they push you out of the way. They don't, they're not very courteous to cows. The cows and the monkeys in the street.
Cows are digesting the field of consciousness so that we can.
They don't treat the cows very great. When I was where I was, they weren't treating the cows that great.
They don't. No, but when they're walking around, we'll say in Delhi, old Delhi, they're also pretty not nice, the cows.
Oh, the cows, yeah. The street cows.
Also those guys who are, what do they call them again? eunuchs, yeah, the eunuch singers there are dressed in, they're more like boxers, actually. I thought they would be more like Audrey Hepburn. When I first, but they look more like lightweight boxers. So. So they all seem pissed off about something. Now the cows also, are they pissed off?
I met some sweet cows down by the river in India.
Yeah. Did you meet pigs running around?
No.
By the outhouses that they have? They have like sometimes 10 or
Oh.
15 outhouses together. And
Yeah, no, there were no
it's
outhouses.
weird. It's, when you get to those outdoor villages or unincorporated villages, they call them, they all live pretty naturally there. But you do have animals running around in a way that sometimes can be pretty weird.
Yeah, monkeys, dogs, and cows is what I saw.
The monkeys we had to go through to get to the house in the Himalayas. They would sit on the step below there and yell at you and scream.
It's like they always look like they're scheming.
Yes.
And people are always scheming against them.
Yeah.
No, they treat the animals pretty bad.
Yeah.
And the animals act pretty bad too. So good luck there, Spiro. There was an interesting article today somewhere in India. Well, I'll hold it for you. There's an Indian designer that seems to be, I'll show you, it was in the magazine, I think, in the New York Times magazine. I was just stumbled upon it. But it had elements in it where he can design outfits or circumstance or situations that are spiritual. But okay, everyone, it was very nice to hang out.
Yes.
For See you
Thank you,
tomorrow
Danny.
night then. Okay, take care of yourself.
Hi, everybody.
Thanks, Danny.
See you soon,
Bye
Kai.
bye. Thank you, Kai.
Hey, guys.
Happy Guru Purnama.
Yeah.
Bye bye.
And I guess you'll call and put that together then with Mary, right?
Yes.
Okay then.
Thank you.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you. Bye bye.